Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming. My name is Hollow and we have the new Diablo 4 patch. The big balance patch that we've been waiting for is here. Loads of gameplay changes, fixes and hopefully improvements, as well as when we finally come down to the class section, a bunch of class related buffs, specifically buffs across the board. In my case, I've just picked up a rogue alt over the last week and I've just hit level 80 and I'm really enjoying myself. While with my Necromancer, I certainly knew what I was hoping for in regards to buffs. I'm very interested to see what's changed for rogue because, you know, out of all the classes, I think rogue is the most balanced. Like, yeah, there's some builds that aren't as good as others, but they're actually pretty close and I could imagine like minor tweaking putting them even closer. So let's have a look and see if this patch has done that. Starting from the top with Invigorating Strike, one of the basic attacks of rogue. The skill would basically allow you to get some nice energy regen after attacking, which is cool, and they've just improved the base damage by 2%. Bit of a weird one, this one, because I don't think that's really going to change the relevance of the ability. Really hard for any rogue to take anything but puncture with the enhancement that makes you get vulnerability pretty much permanently in all targets, because that's so good. 2% damage increase really doesn't seem like enough to me. And then we look at, say, Blade Shift, again, same thing, 1% damage increase, does not feel like that relevant to me at all. It's a different story though when we look at Heartseeker. With this ranged basic, we basically shoot an enemy, which then shoots our critical strike chance against that enemy up. Now its base damage has been increased here by 2%, which is not that relevant, but the primary Heartseeker damage, well, that's been increased from 30% to 75%. Primary Heartseeker essentially turns it into an AoE where it deals massively reduced damage on the bounce to the next target. And now that bounce to the next target is not reducing as much damage, but is still reducing by, say, 25% now. Certainly making that basic more AoE viable, but I still don't really see that competing with Puncture and not really with Forceful Shot either, which is what Penetrative Shots would be using. And you know, yeah, that's been buffed by 2%. Not a major buff, but since they were using it, cool, a slight increase. These buffs so far have been pretty whelming, but now we have a core skill improvement with Barrage, which is a popular and powerful build, and yet it has actually been buffed in a really minor way. Another 2% damage increase from 20% to 22%. Not that major, but certainly nice for any Barrage build. It's fair to say that Caltrops, our next skill that's been changed, isn't an overly popular one. Its enhancement, that chill, has been increased from 20% to 25%, which is nice to have, but not a major change. These are weird buffs so far for rogue. Thankfully, things get a bit more interesting with Smoke Grenade, where its cooldown's been reduced from 15 to 13 seconds, certainly improving its viability. But another very unpopular ability that a 2-second cooldown reduction, I don't think it's going to change. Next is Rain of Arrows though, which has some interesting changes. This ultimate ability is hilariously underused, although has a build kind of centered around it. Both Shadow Clone and Death Trap are much more popular ultimate abilities by comparison, so this seeing a buff just makes sense. The cooldown has been reduced from 60 seconds to 55, so that's nice, but not overly huge. While the enhancement, the Prime Rain of Arrows, that's imbuement potency has been increased from 20% to 30, which is very relevant. As a build, it is a bit of a weird one, not like a true meta or that relevant one. People could compare this to, say, Flurry, but it requires quite a bit of setup. Seeing that being rewarded slightly more for a damage increase is actually a good change, but I don't think it's going to really shift things up in terms of meta. A funny change that I also saw for Necromancer is the improvement to the mount special ability, in this case Volley. They've improved the base damage of it from 70% to 105. The mount abilities generally aren't crazy strong, and I can see that them buffing it, well, it makes sense, but I also don't think this is going to be major for that. It's not going to make it crazy. It'll just deal a bit more damage than it previously was, which was hitting a bit too low, to be fair. But we're already towards the end of the list here, now coming into the passives. First up with the key passive, Close Quarters Combat, which now has a damage bonus of 30% compared to the 20% previously. Close Quarters Combat getting a buff is, well, an obvious one, because the builds I'm aware of right now, you know, you're probably going to be using Momentum if you're melee focused in any way. If you're using the traps, then sure, you'll go Exposure, and then when it comes to range, Precision is the obvious pick. So where does that leave Close Quarter Combat? Pretty much nowhere. A 10% damage increase is certainly something, but it's not a universal damage increase. Basically, you deal damage to a close enemy with either Cutthroat or Marksman skills, and that grants a 10% attack speed for 8 seconds. So while you've got both going, you then get a now 30% times increased damage against crowd control enemies. So anything that's CC'd, you do hit a lot harder. I would say this pushes itself into a consideration point, but we're going to have to test this one to really know how good it is. Our next concept comes down to legendary aspects which have changed, and only 2 come up for Rogue. First is the Escape Artist, which has its cooldown majorly decreased from 100 to 45 seconds. So here's how Escape Artist works. Upon taking damage from surrounding enemies, you just drop a smoke grenade and dodge the next 2 to 7 attacks based on your roll within 10 seconds. So previously that was happening just under every 2 minutes, which is just ridiculous, to a much more relevant 45 seconds. I suppose there's potential for that to be really good in really pushing high tier content where you're going to want that kind of true mitigation. Maybe in like the Uber Lilith fight, that could be really nice, but I remain unconvinced by this one. The other changed aspect then is Umbrious, which had its lucky hit chance to gain a Dark Shroud. Well, that's up from 30 to 50% to now 40 to 60%. So certainly more often, even with a lower roll. But with this aspect, it's only tied to marksman skills. Critical strikes with marksman skills are the ones that have the chance to actually grant you the Dark Shroud Shadow. And it's actually a very good aspect. You might even put on, say, your amulet for a penetrating shot build. So to see this get buffed is a surprise, but a welcome one, as it is just making penetrative shot builds better. The last change for Rogue is a weird one. It's for the unique Eyes in the Dark. It's increased the death trap cooldown reduction from 30 to 15% to 20 to 15%. So basically for death trap, if it doesn't hit a boss or a player, it continues to rearm itself until it kills an enemy. But the cooldown will be increased to, say, on a bad roll 30%, on a good roll 15%. Basically, it's not improved the good roll cap on that, but it does mean the bad roll is not as painfully terrible, making this much more of a usable unique if you don't get like a top roll. But I also wouldn't say it's like that popular of a unique, so maybe they should have actually buffed it. It's a strange one. What do you guys think on that one? But yeah, that actually covers it for the Rogue changes. I would say that we've had a relatively small list of changes there, and compared to other classes like my Necromancer look, I've not seen any mechanical changes or big changes that really scream, whoa, this build is good now. Probably overall, I would say range and penetrative shot has the biggest beneficial change here, and it's a question of like that new key passive buff of close quarters combat. How good is that damage bonus really compared to something like momentum or your precision passives that just seem to do a lot more? And again, it's my opinion that Rogue is kind of the most balanced class out of all of them, where others have severely lacking builds that are off meta, that are totally irrelevant, or aspects to their playstyle that is just not used. Rogue is relatively balanced when it comes to builds. It's undeniable that, you know, they have some basics that are next to irrelevant compared to the basically 2 that people pick, but we have to acknowledge that if you look at their core skills, pretty much all of them have some kind of way to make a build around them, and it's going to be viable and good. And big picture, the Rogue certainly is up there with a very respectable solo Uber Lilith time currently, and as a class able to push higher tiers of content themselves if you go more range and go like penetrative shot focused. Going in, I didn't really know how big of a buff Rogue would see, and looking at this, it doesn't really seem like they've had much of one. It's just been little things across the board. We're going to be looking into things, testing things, making new builds with a new patch, so we're going to get a real look at how this actually works compared to just reading it. Let me know what you think though. How are you feeling about the Rogue changes in this patch? For now, I've been Hollow, you've been you. Thanks for watching, we'll see you next time.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.